According to a study by the United Nations, peace agreements are 35% more likely to last at least 15 years when women are involved in the negotiation processes. Their participation helps to broaden the agenda, incorporate diverse perspectives, and promote sustainable peace. Despite these proven benefits of women's participation in these processes, women make up only 13% of negotiators, 4% of mediators, and 3% of the people who signed the major peace processes worldwide, as reported by the Council on Foreign Relations. The United Nations Development Programme, the UNDP, also reports that women's inclusion in peace-building processes can improve the outcomes and enhance the effectiveness of interventions that are being taken during the peace-building processes. And these statistics only emphasize the importance of increasing women's meaningful participation, so not only any participation in the world, but meaningful participation in peace-building processes to foster sustainable and inclusive peace. And I really like that statement, inclusive peace. They also really highlight the need for further efforts to address the gender gap in decision-making roles within peace negotiations and agreements, but also in general. Welcome to the new episode of YouthSquad. In this episode, we will explore the critical role that women play in building and sustaining peace in societies affected by conflict and violence. With me today, I have an amazing guest, an inspirational feminist that really does the work that everyone talks about, that really doesn't mind getting her hands dirty in that sense when it comes to the real field work and when it comes to working with women that are also contributing to peace building. I have had a chance to see firsthand what my guest does through her work, but also what she does personally and how she lives the values that she represents. And when I thought of the topic for this podcast, I had no doubt who was the right person to call. Hello, Midana. First question for you. How are you?
Hi, thank you for this kind introduction. I'm good.
Good. That's a great start for this topic, and I hope you stay good and even maybe be better by the end of this episode. Okay, yes, you've heard the statistics as well. You probably knew it before. We have the data that proves that it's important to include women because the peace building processes last longer, but also are more inclusive. But it's also having women making half of the world population. It's only common sense to involve them in such important political and social processes. But why do you think it's important to include women? What did I not mention that you would like to highlight and underline?
Well, maybe first and foremost, I would like to highlight that it's their right to be on the table. They're, of course, born, and by default of being born, I think that they should be guaranteed to have the place at the table when it comes to the peace building process, but also other processes which affect their life. But as you stated correctly, there are some positive consequences when they are involved. And you mentioned that usually when they're involved, the peace can be sustainable and it has a positive impact in the long run. Also, I see that sometimes when they are included, some topics emerge because of them, and it may be if the situation was different, they could be overlooked, or men that are on the table can even remember about some important issues that should be addressed during the peace-building processes, negotiation processes, or in mediation. So I think that they're agenda setters. They are, and some research also shown that they're maybe the women are the social group that usually always make some ties with their constituencies. So they're behaving like some kind of intermediator when it comes to a peace-building process. So they are working on the ground. They are also speaking with different social groups, not only women, but other vulnerable groups. And they're more likely to have those inputs and insights in the peace-building process as well. So I think that those three things are very important. So to have the connection with the society and all the other vulnerable groups, to have some new topics during the peace negotiation process. And of course, they're rightful to do so, because they're human beings, and they should be the ones representing their points of view.
I mean, if we are living in a society, we might as well create a society that, meets our needs and is actually tied, and it's actually tailored around what we are as human being. And obviously we're all different, and the only way to have the righteous and the fair society that we live in, or the policies that are created that are as fair as possible, is to actually involve the groups that we are talking about during the discussion, because who would know better what a woman needs beside a woman?
Sure.
In the end.
That's why we should have women in parliaments, because when it comes to some laws and policies that could regulate more, the important topics and areas of women, they should be the ones leading the debate and deciding what to do with their body, what to do with other things that only women have the experience to talk about.
Exactly. And you mentioned something that women are usually, that research shows that women are usually those that also connect with the community, take closer attention, pay closer attention to certain things that sometimes are overlooked and maybe unconsciously ignored during the process of peace building. Is that like an example of where women being forced to be caregivers for so long, gradually made them, even today, in a more, in a more modern world where they are allowed and, where they have the rights to participate in political processes, as you mentioned, are actually now they're using that traditional role, so to say, that was forced onto them for many years as a benefit, as something to be actually used in the peace building process as a positive thing.
For sure, I think that that's the advantage of having a women experience and being in a position where you need to fight for your rights instead of just enjoying them. Also, I think that women are used to listen more carefully than men, for example. And when it comes to this conflict situation, I think that women are the ones who usually step back for a second and think of some, as I said, social groups and some issues that are at the moment being forgotten. And I think that's the most important things of having women involved. Of course, not all women to do or think the same and have this kind of experience, but usually women that wants to be in the front line when it comes to peace negotiation process are the ones that are really having this kind of background and are the ones who actually wants to move society forward. We saw that in Northern Ireland. We saw maybe that's the most successful case where we saw that some topics regarding education, regarding violence among women, the violence against women, sexual violence as well, were addressed because of the engagement of women from both sides. You mentioned something that I found really interesting, and I'd like to go back to it. Women are more prone to listening, and during the conflict situations, from what I've learned so far, it's really important to actually listen. And when we talk about women and their voices, obviously we have our voices. So in order for them to be heard, there are different mechanisms that exist, and you mentioned parliaments, and the parliaments are supposed to reflect what we've seen, the society, the form of society, the different groups, age-wise, gender-wise, but also, other things, ethnicity-wise, and so on. So do you think that maybe a mechanism such as, quota that exists within the parliament would work with the peace-building processes? And if so, why? And if not, why not? I would say that number matters, and maybe as a first step, that should be in place, of course. Quotas are not perfect, nor do they guarantee that everything will be fine after we have a certain number and percentage of women, young people, other different representatives of different groups? So, but there are an initial step when it comes to having a really inclusive peace building process, and to have delegations that are very representatives, whether it comes to parliament or other forums or bodies that are in the similar role. But also, I think in parallel, we should always think of those women who get the chance to be this kind of in a representative role, and to work with them along and to empower them, and to also bear in mind that if there are no mechanisms in place that should guarantee this two-way communication, we are only having women because of the number, because of the quota.
There's no meaningful participation.
There's no meaningful participation, and I really liked your introduction, actually, because you said meaningful participation. Meaningful participation is not like picking one woman, one Albanian, one Serbian, and getting them to the table, but choosing the rightful representatives and giving them enough resources to do this heavy work that needs to be done beforehand, before they have the chance to actually speak about the opinions and the expectations of their communities that they are representing. So without having enough resources, and just by picking any representative, we are not speaking about meaningful participation, and we cannot have this kind of results that you explained that usually are usually is achieved when women are at the table.
You mentioned preparing the women for the roles of representatives, and obviously everyone who takes the role of representing someone or something should be prepared. Maybe that's not usually the case, and unfortunately that's not sometimes the case. But when we talk about preparation of women for these processes, do you think it's important to address the gender question during the preparation of women for these processes, or to just equally prepare them just like you would prepare anyone of any gender for the table?
I think that gender question should be, of course, tackled, and I think there are so many hurdles that you need to pass on while you're a woman than, for example, being a man and enjoying those privileges that society gives you just by being born as a man. So that's one thing that, of course, always should be taken into account. Also for young persons as well. There are so many hurdles that you also need to pass while being young. And if you're a young woman, I think that you're in the most favorable, least favorable situation. And when you're a young Roma woman, then this just adds up to being in some kind of situation that usually no one that is outside of this social group can understand. That's why it's important to listen to those people, and really to try to understand all the context actually that is causing the specific situation that person is facing at that moment. So consultation. There are so many mechanisms on how you can consult different social groups, but bearing in mind what are the specific. What are the different contexts that this social group is facing. I think that's what it leads to having better results.
You mentioned the example of and the model of Northern Ireland and what happened there, and I had a chance to also hear about it and learn something about it, and to try to grasp the concept of what happened there. And their conflict was also something that's also relevant to the Western Balkans region, something that's relevant to other conflicts, because as Dostoevsky said, all happy families look like each other, and every unhappy family is Tolstoy. Yes, sorry, thank you. But these conflicts are unique in their own ways, but they also are very kind of, there are certain practices that you can take as good practices and as good examples to to implement in different contexts, and these things we can do. So what happened in Northern Ireland, and can you tell me like a little bit more, just for the audience that's listening to the podcast right now, to understand how were the women there prepared for the table?
Yeah, I really like the Northern Ireland case because it really focuses on communities, like two communities that have different religious background, that have different ethnicity, in their opinion, but and they're of course expecting to live in a different country, right? In different system. There is maybe not a different so much system of values, but yeah, they're wishing two different
entities.
Yes. And what I really liked, when it comes to peace building, sometimes infrastructure is very important. And I mentioned the relations with communities that were nurtured throughout the conflict. And for example, there are so many community centers nowadays that have two entrances because the conflict is still present. Although there is a peace agreement, which has been enforced for many years now, of course, the tensions cannot just disappear by only signing a peace agreement. Peace is a much longer process to be established. It not always goes linearly, so it's not always progressive. But those community centers are doing very good work because they really offer a lot of opportunities for people to just come and discuss very ordinary things, but also tackle the conflict and the issues that are nowadays present. And what I liked about those community centers is usually they're, of course, placed in a mixed community districts, and you can enter from both sides at the same time. So there are two entrances that connect you with the Irish and with the Protestant community. And I really like it because you can go into the community center and you can also not be perceived as a traitor. Yeah. So to come and to go from the other side and to mingle maybe with the others that your group is not really expecting you to do so. So I think that's important. Of course, from the government side, there is a strong push to build this kind of mixed housing to offer citizens with opportunity to live in a mixed housing buildings rather to live in districts which are solely Irish or solely Protestant. But this is a slow process, of course, and it will probably take a lot of time before having really those mixed communities in place in Irish. But even if we are just observing situation now, I think those community workers, youth workers, do an amazing job, especially when the walls are still there. For some of them, walls are a symbol of peace. For some of them, it's a symbol for division. But having opportunity to move around and having a support from your youth workers and community workers, I think it really does a lot of good things on the ground for ordinary people.
And from what I've picked up on when I visited Northern Ireland, is that it's not that rare to see women being the first, those that are making the first steps towards the reconciliation, those that are entering those community centers that you mentioned, those that are walking through those doors without expecting anything, but still expecting a lot. And by making small steps in a literal sense, but on a more philosophical way, making huge differences and taking huge steps in that sense. Yes.
And yeah, sorry to interrupt you, but
please do.
What I also was amazed by is that those women are the ones who actually went to establish and continue to have a continuous dialogue with armed group as well. So not only they're working with women, with younger generations, teaching them about what peace is and what peaceful society should look like. But they're also engaging ex-veterans, ex-military fighters. They are working with armed groups and they're trying to engage them as well in the dialogue. I think that that's also important. And it's not the same when the two groups are, fighting among each other. They're also having their ways of communication, but having ordinary people with their infrastructure and resources and using that to engage also the ones who are on extremes, I think it's important. Not always, there are solution results and solution to the situation that is being discussed, but having them in the dialogue is already a huge success. And unfortunately, I cannot imagine that this happens here in the region in this kind of manner. I think that the conflict is still ongoing in that regard. Yeah.
But you also mentioned something previously when you mentioned there's a strong government push for those communities to be built, but community centers to be built. But it's also women being recognized as a mechanism, or maybe that's an unfair thing to say, to call them mechanism, but as a resource, as a resource, basically, to they're recognized as something that's important and crucial for peace building processes to continue and to stay, for societies to stay peaceful. And that's also really important. And I don't think it's usually the case, and it's not also, it's quite often that women are targeted for being participants in such processes due to, general misogyny, general sexism that we are surrounded with. Women are generally targeted for all sorts of things that they do, whether they be a singer, an actress, a sport, someone in sports. But, women that are publicly going out talking about unpopular things, especially in conflicted areas, they are even more targeted by this phenomenon like hate speech and discrimination. And how do you think that this whole environment and atmosphere that women are surrounded with affects women that make a decision to embark such a journey, or maybe are not even sure whether they should?
Yeah. It's really difficult situation that we're living in, especially in this region, in the region of Western Balkans. And I would also like to mention another hurdle maybe that you didn't mention, is that when you're belonging to civil society, for example, which often does this kind of work, like building constituency that is more prone to engage in peace building processes rather than to nurture the conflict and those burning issues that can move us backward. And they have additional depiction that they are traitors, that they are state's enemy. And when you combine this kind of narrative with the narrative of the propaganda, political propaganda that we are always living in, you can barely do anything in this kind of context and situation. And that is, I think, what keeps us really at this starting point. Exactly, I don't think that we have at the moment begin to talk about peace. We're talking about agreement, different kinds of criteria that needs to be fulfilled in order to advance in the European integration process, in order to get the support from the allies or something like that. But at the ground, based on the lives of people, I don't think that we engage in this kind of dialogue that we mentioned happened in Northern Ireland. And it's very difficult to motivate people to do so. That's why you need workers at the ground, like youth workers, community workers, women that are present. They're in different civil society organizations, but they do not have resources, nor do they have this positive political push to do the work on the ground. They do it anyways, and that is why we are, in my opinion, not in the war situation, because there is there are strong opponents to any kind of conflict that I mean can be worse off at the moment. But to move forward, to build positive peace, I don't think it's happening because of these strong narratives and different depiction of those who try to do something good for both societies. And we have this kind of narrative that if you do something for the other, you're doing against your own people, you know, and that is what holds us back.
And simple but not so simple question: how do we change the narratives?
Yeah, by convincing, actually, from a point of view of one person, convincing your at least 20 people around you. And I really like, I mean, we do a lot of slavas, you know, we go to a lot of birthday parties, we go to different social events. And what strikes me, I mean, of course, it's the most natural thing to talk with the ones that think more or less the same way that you think, but engaging in a dialogue with the ones who are opposing some of your standpoints. If you're, seeing in a room someone who is talking bad about different social group, different ethnicity and everything, trying to engage in a dialogue with them, I think it's already a positive step. You can do that if you're like citizen living in a country. But if you're a part of some networks, some organizations, you can do more. You can fundraise for the activities that you think that could contribute to engaging at least a bit more people to discuss about this. If you're hopefully in a position of deciding in this kind of role, you can do more. You can enforce policies that could be top-down and that could really generate different support to your cause. So there are some things that needs to be actually changed in order for us to move forward. And of course, if you're I forgot to mention that if you're belonging to a civil society, you can always advocate for these kind of things to change, not only to wait for decision makers to make up their mind and to try to do something positive, but to advocate towards them to maybe speed up a bit the process.
And you mentioned a couple of levels of, a couple of fronts where you can, direct your fight towards. So basically, you mentioned social gatherings that are informal. You mentioned decision makers that have a big role in that process, and maybe even the biggest, because the influence that they have, the platform that they, are dealing with and are, using for their voices to be heard is also huge. And, it's not that rare to see also decision makers spreading the hate speech towards women going into political process, going into, tackling these issues, because as you mentioned in the very beginning, they have the right to, and they are allowed to. And so, you mentioned these couple of different levels, and they all actually form a bigger picture which we have to take into consideration, and to understand that all of these levels, the informal ones with social gatherings, but also on social media, media in general, traditional as well as the new one, the new ones, and the formal discussions that happen in parliaments, the formal discussions that happen within the decision-making processes, they all are a part of a huge process that we have to go through in order to even start talking about some type of equality within.
And we forgot so many other platforms as well. And that's the trickiest part. You can, the best solution to have and the best action is to synchronize all those platforms and to move all together for the same cause. And that is difficult because if you're, for example, having good politicians realizing that we can be a prosperous society without trash talking about the others, you still have media, for example, that spreads a ton of violence on them. And they have unethical approach to reporting on so many issues that are affecting the position of women, that are about gender-based violence and many other things. So there's always this kind of situation when you make some steps forward and you also make some steps backwards. And that's why we're in a very difficult situation right now.
No, it's definitely the worst thing that is being. I mean, that's too strong of a statement. I'll tone it down. But one of the worst things that can happen to a woman, in this public sphere, is using the fact that she's a woman against her in order to discredit her. How many examples there are of the media using the fact that somebody looked a certain way that day to try to discredit them, somebody having more than one marriage in the past to discredit them. All these things that are against traditional, air quotes on, like against the traditional images that we have of women being used not to for us to understand that we are improving as a society and actually are getting out of these chains that we were locked in but for so long, but to actually say that this is it, this is the end, this is how we go down, because women are now going into politics. They are not looking the best that they can. Their summer bodies are not ready, and their husband is not happy. And how are they even managing to establish the work and life balance? Which is never asked to a man. A man is never asked to.
They're praised for, having the youngest women / girlfriend, although they're much older. They're praised for all of those things that you said that are taken against women, and that's like the double standard that we are living in. And one of the most difficult things actually to overcome is to really, have gender neutralize when you're discussing platforms, agendas, especially when we are talking about politicians. It doesn't matter if you're a man or women, it matters. I mean, your standpoints matter. Yeah. Your opinion matters. Your agenda matters. Your willingness to listen to each other matters. And when it comes to women, you cannot hear all of those things. You just see.
And so basically what I heard you say right now is we have to address the gender-sensitive questions from a gender-neutral position. So to say, in a sense, like, it doesn't matter who's, like, obviously we have to have women at the table, but it doesn't have to matter that she's a woman. It has to matter what she's saying, and we have to tackle certain issues in order for our society to be more just, to be more fair. But we must, understand that, being a woman shouldn't be a disadvantage. It should be advantage. Yes. Yeah. But I have one interesting question that popped into my mind while we were talking. All these things we were talking about, this power balance between men and women, and how the roles are set between these two demographic groups. But how are women treating other women within these processes? What is your experience, and what have you seen around you?
Well, I saw both cases, like other women being jealous of the attention that other women is having, or, causing the reaction that is not in favor of women's solidarity. But I saw so many examples of women being solidar for each other. So I think that, you can see now a group of feminists that are very vocal, that are talking about women's solidarity, that are standing behind the other women that are maybe tackled in a wrongful way, or they're now in the position that they need support. And what actually bothers me the most are the other group of women that are considering themselves not being a feminist, but they're aware sometimes, and that's why we need more feminists on the ground. They're very likely to see when something happens that they're feminist, although they are not saying that they are. So I think that now feminist in our discourse, everyday life, has a very pejorative meaning at the moment. But when you are engaged in a dialogue, you can see that those women that are not perceiving themselves as feminists, they do have feminist standpoints. And that's why we need to talk more. I mean, whether you're considering yourself feminist or no, I really believe that many women, like a majority, will stand for women's rights, will fight for them, will question everything society told them beforehand, will question traditional roles that she is living in. And those kind of women will fight for each other. And that's what is my experience, actually. Although, at first, they're not, and they're reluctantly saying that they're feminists.
I mean, obviously, because of the whole discourse that you mentioned, and the feminist being the new F word, it's in that way. But also, when we are talking about, when we were mentioning this, men versus women in that sense, and putting things in that way, I think it's really important to mention that it's not men versus women; it's everyone versus patriarchy. Yeah. And usually men are those who are kind of taking the benefits from the patriarchy in that sense, and the negative consequences of the patriarchy are maybe sometimes overlooked and harder to see on men than they are on women. And on women we can see them directly and very obviously because they're obviously oppressed. But even when women start acting as the oppressor in that sense, when they are, targeting other women or, putting down other women in order to raise above, can we really blame them? Can we really blame, if I may say, a victim for choosing a certain way to survive in a world that was created around them? Because I had the chance to talk at this panel where we were talking about menstrual poverty and how certain women are not perceiving themselves feminists and are even sometimes questioning why we need, for example, free pads. I can earn my own money, like I'm fine. Understanding that those women are just the same, blinded in the same way by the patriarchy as men are, is what really can change a lot of things. And approaching those women that are ignorant at first has to be with patience as well,
of course, and very carefully, to engage in. I think that I mentioned dialogue 100 times in this episode, but engaging them in dialogue, seeing why they think a certain way, and trying to understand their own unique position, because maybe some of the things that you mentioned are part of their identity as well. They internalized it. So that cannot be changed overnight. Sometimes it should change if that's what the person is believing in and does not harm anyone with their opinion. Always having this kind of discussion and conversation, I think is very important to understand the other side. But you mentioned the menstrual poverty, and for me, it's one of the things that can really, I think, gather a lot of new voices, actually, because no one, not no one, but very few people thought about it at first. But now, when you're, constantly discussing this, not only from the perspective of vulnerable groups that really are dependable on having support for menstrual products, but from the standpoint philosophical one, you did not choose to bleed each month, right? Yeah. It was given to you, and you have additional financial burden because of that, because of something that you didn't choose, and that is from the philosophical standpoint, topic to be discussed, not from the practical position, where do you have finances or not to pay for it.
Menstruation is a really good illustration of what it feels to be a woman. In that sense, you are something you didn't choose to be, because we were all born a certain way, and we all have some biological functions that we cannot control, but we don't pay for it. For their biological needs, they have to pay for it. And, it's rarely discussed in the political settings, in the political environments, in these formal discussions that we talked about. And that's what also happens during peacebuilding processes. Like, if we don't have women there, are we going to talk about gender-based violence during wars, after wars, how it affects? Like, it's really important to include not only women. Now, if we're talking about broader perspectives, sexual minorities as well, ethnic minorities as well. They all form our society, and no matter how small the percentage is, we tend to, when we talk about percentages, numbers, forget that these are actual, real people that are affected by the policies that we make.
Yeah, and they should be convinced in this agreement, in this peace that you're signing, as a man, probably, usually.
Yeah, usual.
Yeah. So, those citizens are to follow your agreements. And if they weren't part of making the agreement, they are not valuing it because it would feel as imposed to them, and they wouldn't actually do according to the agreement the work afterwards. So if you're willing to really have a sustainable peace, you need to engage citizens beforehand. And women are, the data says it, women are the ones who are doing this kind of initiative and this kind of push they have, not men, because men are, in a position of power, and they probably won't remember to report to anyone.
Yeah, they rarely question their privilege in that sense. They rarely stop and wonder, because it's also not them who are to be blamed in that sense, in a literal sense, because it's the whole system of values, this whole system of educational system that doesn't teach you to critically evaluate your position in the society. Even if you are a woman, you can be very privileged. You can be very financially privileged. You can be very religiously privileged, race privileged. There are different ways of discriminating against someone, so there's also different ways of being privileged. And so, you have to ask yourself, you have to disseminate your position in the world, your position in society, your position in this chain of different things, that you are one piece of domino in a whole chain of dominoes, and if you fall, there's a whole chain reaction after that. And it's important to understand that not a single society functions if an individual is not taken into consideration. Not functioning well, because what you mentioned, taking ownership over the process that's happening, political process that's happening, can ensure, for example, if you're passing the law, and you're not involving one huge part of the group that you're targeting by the law, with this law, this whole group of people, there's a big possibility they won't be understanding the importance of following such a law because they weren't involved. Sure. And, ensuring the democracy and ensuring, the rule of law, it comes from being involved.
Sure. And this kind of law has been passed. Although maybe solutions and provisions are perfect, you wouldn't understand them. Or, the other situation, for example, when you're engaged in a debate and you see and hear the arguments from, the different side, why some provisions cannot be like you wanted, but you understand the logic behind it, you're more willing to, accept the compromise and to know why the situation has to be that way. But in a position when you're just, receiving it without any consultation, without opportunity to be engaged and discuss and to change something, then of course you're not willing to fight for it, stand behind it, and do something.
Yeah, to believe that it's right, even if if you don't agree 100% with it. If you believe that there are certain benefits coming from it, you might as well, respect. And that's the thing. Respect is the big crucial element in the whole thing. Yes. And maybe a synonym for dialogue, which you mentioned way too many times, which I don't agree with. But a synonym for dialogue can be a respectful conversation between two equal parts. And making women equal parts in peacebuilding processes can be a first step towards dialogue.
Yes, and young people.
And obviously, I mean, that's the thing, like, it's so intersectional.
Yes.
And, involving women, when we say involving women, for me, when I say it, it sometimes stands for involving the groups that are not usually involved, because women are, this.
Yes, it's synonym for having, being oppressed.
It shouldn't be. We should talk about definitely, separate groups, and we should mention them equally and separately. That's for sure. But, until we have enough space to do so, it's okay to start mentioning some of them. And that's starting to talk about anything is still starting to talk about, and that's important step.
You're right. When we firstly actually started to discuss women in negotiation processes and in peace building, that was like a huge milestone for inclusive society and having this inclusive representation. And what followed was actually discussing youth in those kind of processes. And we have now 2 resolutions adopted by the United Nations that talk about women and peace and security. And now few decades and few more years, we adopted youth peace security. So it's good to start from something. And I agree with you that discussing women participation is a crucial milestone for the society. It's a civilizational milestone, I would say. And it should be followed by the other groups as well. But I think that cannot be achieved if those groups are not organized in a certain manner, if those groups are not trying to advocate in many other different ways. And that's why, although I remember I mentioned in the first part of this episode that it's like rightful thing to do, you have rights to participate. But unfortunately, we're living in a society where if you do not fight for your rights, you will not have them. So that's why those groups need to be organized and need to advocate for their own rights, because no one will just grant you the opportunity and the possibility to influence.
And even if you feel like fighting for your own rights is a selfish thing to do, what you just mentioned shows that it's not. Because, fighting for your rights as a woman maybe means fighting for Roma rights as well, in that same way. Fighting for LGBTQ plus rights, because often misogyny and homophobia come hand in hand, and they're kind of sisters in that sense. Fighting for women's rights definitely means fighting for youth rights. And, just there's a whole this different set of things.
You're also fighting for men's rights because paternal leave. Yes, that is one of the things that feminists are advocating for. It should contribute to having more equal balance between work and private life, and countering these traditional roles that we are given. Suicide rates. The differences between men and women are huge. That is also a feminist thing to be tackled. And as you mentioned, patriarchy is to blame for this kind of situation and those traditional roles that are imposed to you. All those things. When you're fighting for women's rights, you're fighting for more equal rights.
And one question for the end of this episode. Do you think that men can be feminists, or are they only allies? Is feminists reserved only for women?
I would say that some issues, some things, some topics are reserved only for women. You cannot have this experience as a man, or can you contribute? That's like you're the crossing into mansplaining when you're talking about right,
menstruation, for example,
from abortus, for abortus also. I think that those issues are reserved only for men, for women, not for
those experiences.
Yes, but for others, I think that they could be a feminist. I think that they could be feminists to, as I said, to have this kind of more equal situation, unpaid work, for example. You can be, as a man, feminist in that regard. I wouldn't divide divide them into ally and feminist group, I would really like for us to overcome this kind of division, because I think that the goal shouldn't be the problem. Like the goal is to have an equal society, to have gender equality and equity in practice, in implementation, that all policies that we adopt as society and all the narrative is according to the gender equality and equity principle. So I think that men can be very, very supportive as women are. But yeah, it is important that women lead the way, and that women are in the front line when it comes to achieving this kind of society. But I see in practice, because I work for and with young people, that younger generations are much more aware and much more supportive of this kind of approach. Although there are still very, the positions are different and standpoints are different. And in the one research that we conduct at my organization that I'm working with, we see that, for example, some standpoints that go in favor of gender equality are not perceived the same from a man and women perspective. Although we are making some progress and we see that those differences are not like huge like they were before, but still they're not the same. For example, when it comes to traditional roles, when it comes to the position of women in the labor market, men and women do not perceive that as a problem the same. And that is one of the things that we should bear in mind when we're doing our work, when we are conducting consultations, when we're setting priorities for policies.
Advocating, basically.
Yes.
No, I mean, for me, feminism, from what I've heard, I think we're on the same page in that sense. Feminism means creating space, whatever that space means at that time. Feminism can be, as we mentioned, fighting for men not being, providers. It also can be for, fighting for abortion rights, for, pro-choice movement and everything. So you can be creating space to be fair. It's creating space to be equal. And I think that's important to understand. And in that sense, definitely men can be feminists, and men feminists, I think, since we definitely concluded that men are usually those leading peace-building processes and are in the political processes more unfortunately more present than women are, it is their also responsibility to become feminist in that sense and create space for women in those processes to be there, because it's a fight that we all as a society have, and not only women.
Yes. Create space and even not to be opposed to women having their own place and fighting for their own place. Sometimes you're doing the good thing when you're just not opposing it.
Well, yeah, let's lead with that. Let's start with these small steps, and let's put that as a conclusion to this whole idea of fighting for women in the peace building process. Let's for the start, let's just not oppose it, and then let's go from there. I think that's a good point for the future. And time flew by while we were talking about this, and really I cannot highlight enough how much I would love to continue talking about this topic with you. And I hope we do get a chance to do it in also this type of setting, but I'm sure that we will have a chance to do it, in a more informal setting as well. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk about this, beside the work that you do, and to also spread awareness in this format as well, and to answer my questions and talk with me.
Thank you for the invitation, and I'm really looking forward to continuing this joint venture.
Thank you for listening to YouthSquad. My name is Maria. The YouthSquad podcast series is recorded under a small-scale project in the field of youth called Voicehood of Youth, which will cover 4 topics: human rights, gender equality, European multiculturalism, inclusion and diversity, and active participation. The project is implemented within the Erasmus Plus program and is financed by the Swedish National Agency. Thank you for tuning in, and make sure you stay tuned for another episode.